And her bees just came out of the winter so strong. So we're realizing now that one of the things we've missed along the way is heavily insulated hives. And when Langstroth built his hive, which has become like the standard in the United States, he said that the hives should be built double-walled. And that's how he built his, double-walled with insulation between them. And he said, like, if you're not going to do that, then get a skep, because the insulation in a plain wooden box is just bad.
You have like wood shavings in there to absorb the moisture in the winter and whatnot?
On the top of this, there's a sealed top, and on the upside top, there's a whole sheaf of straw.
Okay.
So everything is really insulated. There's no bars in it. This is a set it and forget it. Once they're in, they're in. You don't mess with them.
There's no venting up in here or any of the sides?
No,
Okay.
no. We just have we have some vent holes around the sides, but we've also been told kind of along the way that very few vent holes. I mean, with hives like we're making, the only reason that people vent is to try to prevent moisture issues. And with these kind of hives and heavy insulation, you don't have moisture issues, because the only time you have condensation problems is when you've got something cold, you know, and then something warm hits it. So this doesn't have that problem. Bees like heavy humidity and heat in the hive, but they don't like condensation falling down on their heads. So this provides that. Figure the bees, as soon as you're popping lids, then you're interfering with what they've built, and you can really foul them up.
Okay.
Like a hive like this, in a real hot summer, if you poked your finger in there, it would be cooler inside there than on the outside. You pop the lid, all of a sudden you think you're doing them a favor, and you're not. So we're having to re-look at how they live in trees. It's a great little hive. Area. So there's, you know, all the bars. We left the back open this much without bars and put a feeder jar in there so they could go back and forth through the little following board and go under and feed. Well, the bees all moved in to the place behind the following board, and there's just a little mass of combs over here, and they built over this. Now, when I look at this, that amount of building for the summer tells me that they don't have a queen. So that's what's going on there. And with this small a group at this point, we probably wouldn't think to try to add one. And with those of us who have had swarm bees over the years, sometimes it's more difficult to add a queen. They just don't seem to take them. And someone pointed out to me, I thought this was kind of wild, they said, you know, heavily commercialized bees, package bees, all come from one of a very few people that produce them, like by the millions. And in a way, all of them can end up sort of interrelated. So if you're just getting from wild bees, they don't have a relationship with those, and those queens don't look familiar to them at all. So I have never had a hive except a new queen, and I know I've done everything right. But, you know...
So is it all just pretty much just drones in there then?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm looking in here and the only brood I see is little pieces of drone brood. So I think they may have gone to laying workers, but that's like fine. I mean, can I look at that? Oh, sure. If you're just doing go into new hives, because they are not going to accept a queen. They're not going to accept frames of eggs. They're not. So it's like just dump them out and they'll go, oh my gosh, I got to go somewhere. And they disperse to different hives. We don't know what may be going on there. We don't want to threaten our strong hives. So we just let them kind of fail away, and then newbies move in. And I had, out of 4 hives, I had 20 swarms in my yard this year. So we filled up a lot of beekeeper boxes and filled up all of my own. And, you know, that's kind of how we do. So we don't stress like, well, each hive has got to make it. We've got to make them make it. It's like we're kind of more with like, well, if they make it and flourish, that's good. They're on their way. And if they don't, we're okay with just letting them be. Because like these girls now, we even ponder whether some of the swarms going out, that there's never any intention for them to make it. They come, they start building, they bring in a lot of honey, they perish. What they're essentially doing is opening up that place for the next group of bees. Then those bees will have a good start because some of the wax is already done and maybe some of the food is in there and there's a, you know, a little bit of pollen. So I think a lot of the swarms go out and fail as like, then the next generation can come in and start utilizing that. So whatever bee perishes, whatever hive perishes, there's all of these resources that are left for the next bees. And I'll show you the cathedral hive, which used to be some insulating panels, insulation shoved into the two-part roof. And the bees build it out like vertical space. So they're able to heat and cool it easier than just flatter comb. So this hive, this is like 3.5 years old now, out of a tree in Washougal. And it's the comb frames on it will hold, like if it's got a full honey pile in it, it's like 10 pounds of honey on one frame. So it's a high volume hive. And I just passed it on because I decided that I really only want the skeps. So I could have kept this. The bees are doing great with insulation. It's a great hive. And Corwin, who makes these, also sells them in parts, or he sells the plans. And they're, you've got to be a pretty good woodworker to be able to kind of pull this off, which I'm not. So I got the hive all made up to start. But again, just insulate like heck. Otherwise, you know, the hive's fine. It's easy to work. It's got frames across the top that go like choop, choop. So there are these three-sided frames that are dove together and not easy to make. And at the top of the frame, there are 4 holes, 4 pass-through holes. So the holes go all the way across the top of the hive because Corwin noticed that a lot of heavily domestic bees don't have it in their heads anymore to leave holes through the comb so they can pass through, and they end up having to go all the way around the comb or all the way under the comb, and they, on the top of our hive, they can freeze to death during the winter because they're like making the curve around the comb to get to a new one with honey, and all of a sudden the temperature drops and they freeze right there and you lose them, and they were like 4 inches away from the next honeycomb. So he put these pass-through holes that go all the way through the tops of the comb, so the bees can go up, right over to the next one, up, and they use them, and they like propolize the inner parts of them. So one of the ways you can tell is if you've got pretty good feral stock is they will make tons of propolis. They'll just stick everything together in the hive, and they'll have holes in the combs that are their little highway routes, so they can get to places quicker. Any questions about any of this?
And how do you open this? It's just this top piece?
This whole big, no. This lifts, and there's insulation in there, but then this whole top piece comes off.
Oh, okay.
So it actually seams itself out from here. This whole piece lifts off.
Okay.
And then when you get it lifted, you're looking right at the face of these really big combs. Yeah.
Can you just tweak that just one more time? I wasn't quite close enough to see it.
Okay. See? So this has little insulation things here and here that the bees can use. So the top is ventilated. Normally this wouldn't be on it, right? But they have the ventilation that goes, the holes that kind of come up through it. And then this whole gigantic piece just lifts off.
Sure.
Of course, they've got it all propolized right now, so it doesn't. But that's how this one's constructed. And I found it a little unwieldy for me to use. You know, my husband doesn't help me with this, so it's like, you know, to lift the big lids off or try to pick up that hive or, you know, grunt it around. I like the skeps. I chip them, I put them down, I'm done. So, so I'm always thinking about weight and the heavy Lang boxes and, you know, how do you make it just a little lighter and a little bit easier. Said if you cut that 4-foot sucker in half, you could set it up and make something that's kind of hexagonal and long. So you know, it's got nice thick wood on it. It'll probably need insulation panels. So she took it, she put the fronts and backs on, she set it up, and it's a beehive. And here's this little bunghole over here. There's entrances in here. So I think this is just a real cool thing. We're like chopping up old hives and making new ones out of them.
So it would have been that flipped over and a long.
Long, just
Yeah,
was like the
with the
one
wide-
we saw over there. This is
Cool.
its twin, 4 feet long. So this is like 2 feet long and tall, and I think the bees would just love it.
So it's just waiting for someone to
It's
move
just
in.
waiting for somebody. They're using, and basically Jennifer just, they chopped down some trees and she grabbed her chainsaw and hollowed out the centers and stacked them up. And there you
She
go.
meted that together. She must
Yep.
have done that. Yeah.
Yep. It just never gets very hot up.
Doesn't get up hot. I know, we're right over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Even
doesn't,
ours, I don't know.
10 degrees cooler up here than it is down in the city.
Yeah, like her blackberries are blooming now. Mine are all
Yeah.
done. So.